Chapter 27. In school the next day, Mrs. Douglas gave us back our stories. I stared at mine, lying upside down on my desk. "Please read my comments," Mrs. Douglas said. "I took a lot of time writing them. I've also graded your stories." A hand shot up. "Did anyone get an A?" "Yes, of course," Mrs. Douglas said. "Well, did anyone get a C?" "Stop fishing, Dylan," Mrs. Douglas said. All around me, my classmates started turning their stories around. I looked over at Lupe and watched as she turned hers over and a small smile escaped her lips. I looked down at my own story. With a deep breath, I turned it around. There, plastered in red ink, on the very top of my essay, was a big, fat C-. 12. That's the number of exclamation marks my teacher used to describe how bad my writing was. Check your grammar. Tenses, Mia. Don't forget tenses. You need to proofread. All in capital letters. The little minus sign on the top of the page winked at me, reminding me that C wasn't bad enough. It had to be a C-. I stared at the red marks all over my story, a hot, bloody mess. In every sentence, there was something circled or crossed out. Why couldn't I ever get the tenses right? I could hear my mom's voice in my head shouting, "Because there are no tenses in Chinese." My mother was right. How could I possibly be as good as the other kids in their language? I should just forget about the essay contest. Who was I kidding? I didn't stand a chance. If I entered, it would just be $300 down the toilet. I stared at my classmates, drinking in their glee as they proudly waved their stories around. I couldn't stop looking at them, showing off their grades, grinning from ear to ear. I envied them with every bone in my body. When at last the school bell rang, I skulked home, my legs like jello, my feet cement blocks. The words, "You are never getting off your roller coaster," played in my head like a news ticker. I stashed my C- story deep in my closet when I got home, along with the essay contest printout I had been saving. I thought if I hid it, I wouldn't have to ever think about it again. But that afternoon, the cable was acting up again, and Lupe came over. "So, what'd you get on your story?" Lupe asked. I shook my head at her. "You don't want to know," I mumbled. She shrugged. "Oh, come on, it can't be that bad," she said. I didn't say anything. "Who cares? It's just a grade," Lupe said. "You should have seen my grades when I first started going to school here." But it wasn't just a grade. It meant I was no good at writing, and how was I supposed to win a motel if I wasn't any good at writing? Before I could help it, everything came pouring out. Lupe's eyes bulged when she heard about the essay contest. For a second, I worried I'd made a terrible mistake telling her. What if she applied for it herself? But then she reached over, took one of the guest comment cards, and scribbled something down. She handed me the card. I looked down at it. It said, "You can't win if you don't play." I looked back up at Lupe. "But it costs $300 to play," I reminded her. Lupe shrugged. "My dad says in America, you gotta pay to play," she said. I looked out the window at her dad up on the roof, climbing down with all those thick wires around his shoulder. Suddenly, Lupe got quiet. "What's wrong?" I asked her. "Nothing," she said. I knew it wasn't nothing, so I asked her again. "I'll be sad if you move away to Vermont," she whispered. This almost knocked me over. It hadn't ever occurred to me how she might feel if I won. She had to know that there was no chance I'd win. I just got a C-, remember? I thought this would make her laugh, but it didn't. Lupe just kept staring at the floor. She didn't even look up when her dad came in and told her it was time to go. "See you tomorrow," I said. "See ya," Lupe muttered. As she pushed open the front office door, she turned and said, "Oh, and Mia?" "Yes?" "I hope you win." Her words warmed me to my toes. That sounds good, doesn't it? Her words warm me to my toes. I like how Kelly Yang did that. Let's see, chapter 28, just like in class, we'll kind of look and see. I will read chapter 28 to you this evening also. Yes, it's evening here. When you've moved schools as many times as I have, you start to think everyone as temporary. Friends come and go. You might have a best friend, but you know in the back of your mind she's not always going to be there. You'll change schools or she'll change schools, and that'll be that. For years I told myself that was okay. That was just the way it was, kind of like replacing a toothbrush. Sure, you might like your toothbrush a lot, but sooner or later you'd have to replace it. You'd get a new toothbrush, and it might feel strange and uncomfortable at first, but then you'd get used to it. I guess I never thought about how the toothbrush might feel. I never thought the toothbrush would miss me. I was walking through the motel, still thinking about Lupe, when my dad waved me over to room 8. Look what a new customer left on the table. I stepped in the room and saw a $5 bill and 3 $1 bills lying on the table along with a note. To the little girl who checked us in, keep doing a great job. $8, my dad exclaimed. You know what that means. I smiled. Chinese people believe that if you receive $8, it's good luck. That's because the word for the number 8, ba, rhymes with the word for prosperity, fa. It was a nice surprise that I went back to the front office to write the customers a thank you note. As I got their registration card out and copied their address down, it briefly crossed my mind that maybe I should stop. Given the grade I'd just gotten in English, did I really know what I was doing? But then I thought about Lupe and how she said you can't win if you don't play. I now had $8 more to play with, $8 that had just dropped down from the sky. I had to say thank you. I went over to Mrs. T's room to try and borrow a dictionary. Mrs. T was always reading. With her cat-eye glasses, she sat by the pool and plowed through at least 2 newspapers and a magazine a day. Not only did Mrs. T have a dictionary, but she was delighted to lend me hers. It was a massive book, almost as thick as the yellow pages. It wasn't just a dictionary either. It had something called a thesaurus, too. A thesaurus, Mrs. T said, was a list of words that meant the same thing as other words. You could trade them freely, like you can trade $1 US for 8 Chinese renminbi. I carried Mrs. T's nifty dictionary thesaurus over to the front office and started composing my letter. Dear Mr. and Mrs. Miller, thank you so much for the $8 tip. Alone, she crosses out, along with the good, crossed out, kind note. It helped my day. And she crossed that out. It made my day. And I was having a bad day. I got a bad grade at school. It was so bad that I was thought, she crossed it out and put, I was thinking about not doing, she crossed out, giving up in, and she crossed that out, on something. But then 2 things happen, and then she added ed to it and changed it to happened. My friend from school says, changed it to said, something nice to me, and I get, crossed out, I got your note and tip. I think that's a sign. Do you? She crossed it out and put, don't you? My friends believe in, and she crossed out believe in. My parents are big on signs. I'm not, especially if they are bad, but I like the good ones, smiley face. Thanks for give, and she crossed out give and changed it to giving. Thanks for giving me a good sign. And thanks for staying in, she crossed out in and put staying at the Cala Vista. I hope you'll come again soon. Sincerely, Mia Tang, Assistant Manager. I worked with Mrs. T's thick dictionary thesaurus, trading words, looking things up, learning phrases like big on and made my day, crossing things out and trying things on until at last I was satisfied with my letter. I copied the letter over onto a clean sheet of paper, sealed the envelope, and placed it on the outgoing mail pile. Then I had another idea. If Mr. and Mrs. Miller were willing to give me a tip, maybe other guests would be as well. Who knew? Maybe if I saved up, I could have enough to enter the essay contest. I called up Lupe. That's a great idea, she said. You should totally do it. Lupe said everyone was always giving out tips in restaurants. Even her dad, if he did an extra good job, got a tip from his customers. Except Mr. Yao, of course. Mr. Yao never gave Lupe's dad a tip, not even on Christmas Day last year when he had to go over to his house to repair the cable. The tip jar would have to be a secret, though. Mr. Yao couldn't see it. If he saw it, he'd just take the money like he took everything else. I wasn't even sure I wanted my parents to see it. They still didn't know about the essay contest. If my mom knew, she might say I didn't stand a chance. And the last thing I needed was her telling me I couldn't do it. I hung up the phone and went to the kitchen, where I found an empty plastic jar. I taped a Post-it on the front of it and wrote the words tip jar. I added some stars for good measure. I put the tip jar on the front desk. I decided I would only put it out when it was just me. When my parents or Mr. Yao were around, or when I was at school, I'd hide it under the desk. I lifted the divider and stood back to admire the jar. It looked good there. I went out the back to return Mrs. T's dictionary back to her. As I was walking across the parking lot, I noticed a couple I just checked in going up to my mom, who was walking back from one of the rooms. They were holding a camera. "Excuse me, will you take a picture of us?" the woman asked my mom. She grinned at her boyfriend. "This is our first vacation together." "Your first vacation? That's great," my mom said in her broken English. Vacation. Oh, she said vocation, sorry. "Your first vocation? That's great," my mom said in her broken English. "Vacation," the couple corrected. "Anyway, will you take our picture?" "Sure," my mom said, taking the camera from her. The couple showed her which button to push, and I could tell my mom was tingling with excitement because she kept running her fingers along the zoom. Finally, a real camera. As my mom put her eye to the viewfinder, the couple hugged each other and gave her her great big toothy grins. "Eggplant," my mom said, except she pronounced it eggplan. The woman frowned a little. "You know it's eggplant," said the woman after my mom put the camera down. "What?" "Eggplant," the woman said, emphasizing the T so vigorously she was practically spitting on my mom. I could feel the heat of my mom's embarrassment from where I was standing. "If you're going to say it, you should say it right. And really, you should be saying cheese," the woman said as she walked off with her camera. My mom just stood there looking so sad. I wanted to run up to her and tell her, "Hey, it's okay. I just got a C- on my English story. I know how you feel." But I knew this would not make her feel better. It would only make her feel worse. It almost made me want to do more math. All right, chapter 29 tomorrow or soon, boys and girls. Hope everybody's doing well. I miss you. Hope you're enjoying the story, even though we can't be together. And I may throw in some picture books along the way until we can be together again. Take care. Miss you all. Love you all. And hope to see you soon. Bye.